And it's showtime. What's happening, everybody? It's me, Robert Phoenix, and behind me we have the lovely Grand Canyon, and it is supposed to be sunrise over the Grand Canyon, which is part of the daily theme here, where I pick a place and the sun is rising, and hopefully the background is inspiring. Come on over here. Look who's here. It's the Astro Cat. The Astro Cat has come to town. There he is. It would not be a show without the Astro Cat. So come on over here. There you go, buddy. Assume your position in your Royal Highness chair. So how is everybody today? I wanted to put a little comment there from Nugs. Let's make it a beautiful day. I like that comment. So let's make it a beautiful day and let's get into it. All right, so this is your Astro Weather. How's everybody dealing with all of the maelstrom of what's going on in the world? It's not easy, is it? And I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but it's not going to get easier because we have reached a tipping point. Excuse me, geopolitically and I would say even energetically, we've reached this tipping point, and everything in many ways has been kind of leading to this moment that we're seemingly hurtling towards, which is a greater conflagration militarily on the world stage, which is not good for anybody, no matter how deeply or passionately you feel about something. Uh, and I'm not here to discount your passions, but just be very mindful over the fact that whatever it is that you wish for and are passionately attached to in terms of an outcome, the consequences of that outcome are so far-reaching that we can't even begin to comprehend what it looks like. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. And we're headed into the eclipse tomorrow. And I hate to be, I don't want to be a, Donnie Downer, right? But we also have to sort of deal with the facts at hand and not turn a blind eye to what's going on in the realm. And we have this eclipse coming tomorrow, I'm sorry, Saturday, which is the beginning of an incredibly heavy cycle. Like I'm going to be doing a presentation on Saturday at Eclipse Day at Harvest Moon, which is an event that we have here in Texas once a year. And I think there's going to be about 60 people attending this year, which is great. And, we're going to get together tomorrow. So we're going to do a live stream from the hotel that we all stay at. We have a conference room and everything. It's a really cool space. So we're gonna do the Friday forecast from the event tomorrow. So you get to meet a lot of people. I do it every year. It's one of my favorite things to do. And then Saturday, when the eclipse is on, we're gonna have 3 different speakers. We're gonna have my good friend Shauna Home, who's amazing, and she's going to be talking about the art of practical manifestation, and she's very, very good at it. And she'll have a lot to share around her journey with acquiring the elements in her life that have made her life work and successful. She's just fantastic in terms of being able to translate that information to people. She's an Aries, so we have to have an Aries for the event, even though it is a new moon. Right, we're in a new moon phase, Sun in Libra, new moon in Libra, but we have the nodes as well. So she'll occupy the Aries node, and then I'm going to be doing a presentation and Dr. Longo from Old World, Florida, will also be doing a presentation. So it's going to be a great day. And people have been wanting to see that day. Well, I'm going to be live streaming that day, and it'll be private. It won't be like Friday where it'll be on YouTube. So it's going to be a private stream, and you can buy a ticket for it. And the link is listed in the show notes from Ticket Spice, right? So if you want to see all three of these presentations, go ahead and check it out. It's right in there. And if you are a member of the 11th house, you should have gotten an email today with a discount link or a discount code to that link. And if you didn't, then get a hold of me and I'll send you the discount code. That's for members. So last night I was putting together my presentation for what I'm going to be talking about. And as I went down the rabbit hole, my piece to what we're all doing on Saturday is basically what happens after the eclipse. Like where are we going? Where are we headed with these energies? And tomorrow's Friday the 13th. I'm sure many of you have heard that whoever or whatever Hamas is, right? Like I think the leadership of Hamas is in some ways reminiscent of the leadership of ISIS. You never, do they get together? Do they have a clubhouse? Do they meet and greet and vote on? I mean, it's, to me, anytime you get into that world, it gets really murky about who's who and what's what and who they actually represent, right? So just to take something on face value that this group is this group and who they say they are, just like people just thought ISIS or ISIL were just one group and they were who they said they were. That's not really the case. And I don't want to get into a deep geopolitical discussion here this morning, but Hamas, again, whatever the entity is, said that tomorrow will be a global jihad, okay? A global jihad. So what's interesting about tomorrow is that it is Friday the 13th, and it is not just any Friday the 13th. It is the Friday the 13th that is mathematically the same Friday the 13th that the Knights Templar were slaughtered in the south of France. And this is where we get the superstition of Friday the 13th being unlucky or bad luck, right? That's where it comes from. So we're also looking at that just energetically. I mean, and there's a reason why I'm talking about this, because that brings us into Mars and Scorpio, which is exalted. It's a great place for Mars. It's powerful, it's deep, it's intense. And it's just entering Scorpio as we enter this eclipse phase, as we enter into Friday the 13th. And, by math, it is still in square with Pluto. So we're still in those Pluto square energies. Only now the trigger, Mars, has shifted. So we're in a new Mars cycle now. And one of the things that I like about Mars and Scorpio, a bit better than Mars and Libra, is that Mars and Scorpio is the type of energy that forces individuals to dig down, right? It's this energy that like Mars always propels you moving forward, right? Like Mercury, it is a planet that represents motion and action, right? But it's always going to be colored by the sign that it's in. So now we have a different manifestation of Mars. It forces people to go deeper into their own psyche, their own awareness, their own spirit. And it's not bad. Like Scorpio is a sign that is really misunderstood on so many levels. So this energy, which is, again, you have to figure out where Mars is in your chart and all that stuff, right? this energy is important, right? It's important, especially if people are drawing what I would call reasonable lines in the sand. You know, this is what Mars and Scorpio can do. There's unreasonable lines in the sand, and there's reasonable lines in the sand. It's also quite regenerative. So I would start to look into, how you can regenerate your energy. Sexuality is always a theme with Mars and Scorpio, right? It's that intensely creative, um, deep, intense, kind of fiery underworld energy that is connected to life force, right? I mean, really, Scorpio is life force. And we've covered this before. When you get into the eighth house, you're dealing with the forces of creation, like bodily creation. So Mars is the ambassador for that, right? And it is the male principle. So this is, but again, initially early on with this square with Pluto, this is not inconsequential. This is very, very powerful. And Mars isn't going to really clear that square for about a week and a half. Two is the outlier, or two is the outer kind of not outlier, the outer cycle of Mars here. So we're still in the Mars square. It just becomes more intense here. There, when you get into Libra, Mars and Libra, you get into all this moral outrage, right? Like Ocasio-Cortez has Mars and Libra, and she's just this kind of unending regurgitation of moral outrage. And so that's what we got into. You don't get into moral outrage with Mars and Scorpio as much. What you get into is getting down to business, right? It's like enough. There's like enough deliberation, enough talk, enough, trying to balance the scales. Mars and Scorpio gets down to business. So this is where we are right now. And while I am not a fear mongerer by any stretch, one of the things that I would advise people to do is I would think it's always good to practice situational awareness wherever you are. Keep in mind that again, we're going to try to get into the personal side of this stuff, but it is personal because now we're in a collective phase, right? Anytime there's an event that happens, it's like a ripple in the pond, right? Well, there's a little pebble you can throw into the pond, and then the ripples go out, and then there's a boulder you can throw into the pond, and not only do the ripples go out, but they're violent ripples. And we're a boulder in the pond moment, right? That's where we are. So when you look at something like, Black Lives Matter, who comes out and supports Hamas, right? So what does that mean? What does that mean domestically, right? It means that things are moving in a direction, and I don't even really believe Black Lives Matter really exists. I mean, Black Lives Matter was a limited hang. Okay, that's what it was. But they can always kind of resuscitate the limited hangs. Just like they can always throw a few sheets on some dudes and you can walk around and look like they're going to, burn a cross on your lawn. It's another version of a limited hang, right? So that said, right, when it comes out into the public square that the BLM supports Hamas, you have to be aware. You have to be aware. You have to have you have to have it anyway. When we were going through everything with 2020, right? I preached situational awareness every single day to people. You have to know where you are, who you're with, what's around you, who's around you, right? All the time. And we're in that phase now. You need to practice situational awareness. And I hate to say that. And again, I'm not preaching fear, but you should do it every day. Situational awareness means that you're not asleep. You're not asleep at the wheel. You're alert, right? You're scanning the periphery of your environment. You should always be doing that. But now we're in a phase where it feels like it's probably more incumbent upon us to do that, right? So now we've got this Mars-Pluto square, and that's really the sort of the big news through all of this. We made it through Mars. You know, I'm not a. If you have Mars and Libra in your chart, you know, I don't think it's necessarily bad. I dated somebody with Mars and Libra in their chart for a while, and you know, you could see it in action, right? I don't want to get into the machinations of it, but you can just see it in action. It is one of those elements that is always kind of stirring things up, and especially as it relates to relationships and fairness. Um, Not a huge fan. Like Mars is it's in its detriment here, right? In Libra, because its rulership is over here in Aries. So you're getting a very mixed version of Mars. It's in a much better place now. Trust me, Mars in Scorpio is a much better expression of Mars, but we're dealing with the Pluto square, which I guess in your own life, if you wanted to just boil it down, you know, it's funny. I got into it with this guy a couple of days ago who was doing an inspection on my car. I think it might have been Wednesday, and you know, there are times when I will do the weather report, and you know, I'll be damned if I'm not doing the weather report in my day. It was one of those days, and I was having one of those moments, and it was really interesting because this guy was being a petty tyrant at the inspection station, and he's just being a real. I mean, he was being a total dick, right? And you know, you just run across these people in everyday life, and they just use their little leverage of whatever power they have to be dicks, right? It's like their lives can be absolutely utterly meaningless outside of that moment where they tell you, "Well, you pass or you fail," and if he doesn't like you, you're not going to pass. And this guy didn't like me. We kind of got into it early on, right? And then what happened was is I went from 0 to 10 really quickly, and I remember leaving the inspection, and I've got Scorpio rising, right? So when I go through stuff like this, it's like my mind starts to do things. It's like I have these tapes from when I'm young, right? Like I'll get that fucker, right? That was going on in my head. And it's like, Jesus, you shouldn't, thought you shouldn't have this law, but you should, don't waste your mental energy over this. But that's kind of where we are, right? Because Mars was in square with Pluto on that day, and it's real vendetta energy. You have to be careful. You have to be really, really careful with kind of what you're carrying personally. And we talked about the, kind of discharging the energy. I think it's important, especially with this Mars Pluto square. You don't want to be walking around with it, unless you, I don't know, you unleash the primal forces of nature between the sheets. That's a whole different story, right? That's a whole different story. Let's talk about the Grand Trine. We have the moon. It's moved into 24 Virgo. And as a result, it's in trine with Uranus, it's in trine with Jupiter, and in trine with Pluto today. So this is a really good aspect for the energy today, because the moon in Virgo is all about, being theoretically healthy, maybe over healthy, maybe neurotically healthy, but it's a moon that has a lot of checks and balances, right? Like check the box, check the box, check the box. So today's a very, very good day for self-possession and taking care of your own emotional well-being, right? Like it's critical. So if you feel like you don't want to be a part of something, or you feel like you need to do something in order to feed your emotions, today's a good day for that, right? It's a good day to drop down deeply with that moon Pluto square, or night, depending on where you're, because some of you aren't here in North America. And the moon Uranus trine gives you an alternate way of dealing with your feelings, right? So a lot of times people get boxed in with their feelings. They're like, oh, fuck, I felt this before. Do I have to feel this again? Right? Oh, here's my old friend, wink, wink, right? Today's one of those days or nights where you can get out of the box. And And again, this idea of discharging whatever it is you're feeling, I think is important, or just dealing with, right? Though this, we talked about this yesterday. Um, but this it's a very, so I would try to look at, alternative ways to work with your emotions, right? And one of the things that we're going to take a positive kind of turn with the moon in Virgo here, instead of being, uber critical with your emotions, right? Be aware of them, have some degree of self possession. It's really interesting. I've been reading more and more about players in sports, and they talk about mental health, right? Mental health. And competitive sports is a real grind. It is a real grind. Like, you have to always be on. You have to outwork the people on your team so that you can hopefully get a starting position. You have to outwork the people that you're competing against. And a lot of times it can be really exhausting, right? It can be extremely exhausting. And so you have these athletes who are looking into, how they can um, have a healthier relationship with what they do, right? And I think the moon in Virgo today speaks to that. And look for alternative ways to, like, deal with your emotions. And I would say with Virgo here, not that your emotions are the most important things in the world, but I would place an emphasis on it, because there is a positive element here. So you're looking just for new ways to process what you're feeling. And we talked yesterday about that Moon Venus conjunction and about sharing and interacting, which I think was really good. But you can resurrect your emotional body with that trine with Pluto, and you can get very clear about what's important. Like, you may decide that you want to cut out social media for a while. That would be relevant. By cutting out social media for a day, maybe you just, you're doing a social media fast, or maybe it's, don't do it tomorrow because you want to watch our show tomorrow, right? But you know what I'm talking about? Like, I love Twitter. Don't get me wrong. It's like, to me, it's really fascinating, and there's so much information being exchanged. And at the same time, it can get you really stirred up, and in a number of different directions, right? You get the dopamine hit because a bunch of people like your post or whatever, and then there's the odd kind of um, antagonistic comment or reply, and it just gets you really stirred up. And it's not the only place, right? Like, I've been noticing that even on YouTube, all these videos now, YouTube is like throwing up all these videos around. And I'll tell you what's interesting about YouTube is that all of a sudden they started to throw me all these videos on Palestine and the creation of Palestine. Like, YouTube is clearly making some choices here around what content I want to see. Not that I wouldn't want to watch a video about Palestine, right? Or the beginnings of the nation state of Israel. Like I wouldn't mind watching those things at all. But YouTube is making those decisions for me. So even when you're on something as benign as YouTube, theoretically, right, you're still in the social media matrix. So today would be one of those days. If you wanted to take a break, it would probably be helpful for you, maybe even healthy. Maybe there's a different way that you can process your emotions. Maybe you can write about what's going on in your life. Writing's kind of a lost art. Or perhaps you can, look at your diet with the moon in Virgo, and you can say, you know what, I may need some more butter fat or whatever. So you could look at, bringing that into your diet, whatever you feel like would be healthy. Now, I'll use the word healthy here. Healthy and nurturing is something that I would look into, right, with the moon in Virgo. So it's a really interesting trine. And if you're, you're in another part of the world and your day is ending, you're shutting down, um, there can be a little bit of restlessness with the moon Uranus trine. But I would say, plug in, some solfeggio tones, or some really interesting binaural frequencies with that moon Uranus trine. It can be really interesting. And that could be another way for you to process what you're feeling. Like, when we sleep, we're always processing, right? So this would be using some interesting healing technologies so that you can process things when you're not going station to station during the daytime. Now, on the other side of this, though, we do have a Neptune Moon opposition. Don't be delusional. It's kind of like, I put the little text from Nugs up because I thought it was a really good thing to just remind people of. And we're in a really volatile time. So when you have a Neptune Moon opposition, the lens that our emotions are being experienced through, which would be Neptune, can be quite distorted, very, very distorted. You again, Pisces. Pisces is a sign that's really dualistic, right? You have, sacred Pisces way at the top of the food chain, right? And then you have, desecrated Pisces down at the bottom of the food chain. And Pisces can go like with that and all the gradations and variations in between. So when we have this Neptune Moon opposition, on a personal level, you could either be delusional about what you're feeling, right? Like, oh, nothing's happening, nothing's going on. It's all just Maya, it's all just illusion. I would say that there's probably some truth to that, but you may want to check that because there are things going on, right? That would be the extreme version. Oh, la da da da. Nothing's. We're living in paradise, and all you people have to do is just wake up and see the world the way I see it, right? I mean, there can be some truth to that, but that would be an incredibly delusional way of dealing with your emotions, especially on kind of a more collective scale. The other thing here, though, the one that I think is probably more important are the messages that are being projected onto everybody on an emotional level, right? Like that to me, this opposition is one of the reasons why you want to do a bit of a media fast, because I think the propaganda and the programming is going to come at us hot and heavy today. Like people are not going to know where to turn on an emotional level today. And that's the challenge with the Neptune Moon opposition, especially in these two signs. To me, it's like incredibly propagandistic and delusional, right? But whose delusions are being handed out in the marketplace? Right? So this is one of those aspects. So today there is some redemptive potential for today. That Mars Saturn trine, man, if you want to complete a project, today's a good day for it. Today is a good day to just, buckle up and get it done with a Mars Saturn trine. Get Mars Saturn trine, especially in the water signs, and especially with Mars and Scorpio, is intense focus. So you have intense focus available to you today. And that's going to be around for a few days, right? Like, get it done. Get it done. Block out the distractions, block out the Neptune Moon opposition. Oh, what's going on here? No, get your shit done, right? Finish it. Take it to the finish line. The other opposition we have is Venus and Saturn. And we talked a little bit about that yesterday. And this formality feels very Edwardian or Victorian, Venus and Virgo, and the Saturn opposition. Try to stay away from hierarchies in relationships, right? Like work closer together because we still have that sextile with Venus and Mars. Try to stay away from hierarchies. That's my advice there. I mean, there are people who are in charge of a project, or they're in charge of a group, or they're in charge of a division, right? That's very, very Saturnian. So they have to have a map, a plan, and give direction, right? I hate the word orders, but give direction. And this is very much a part of how things work in a lot of ways, right? Like you get like work assignments. There's generally a reason why. So those hierarchies are there for a reason. And in the right context with a Venus opposition to Saturn, if you sort out your hierarchies, you're fine, right? Like you're fine. Like, okay, yeah, all right, I'll take that on. Here, give me that. And then you plug in Mars, Pluto, and get it done, right? In that regard, the hierarchy can work. What you want to stay away from is hierarchies in personal relationships, right? And lording over people or being Venus on the other side. In Virgo, basically saying, hey, how can we make this more of an equal proposition? So there's a lot going on today, and I hope you have derived some value and merit out of what we've been able to share. All right. The star of the day brought to you by True Hemp Science. Of course, True Hemp Science is your absolute best place to get anything related to CBD. And all you got to do is go to truehempscience.com. It's all one word, truehempscience.com. And if you spend $100 or more on your order, just type in 15MINS, 15MINS, like 15 mins, and you'll get free product along with your order, right? And $150 and more get you free shipping. And there's a 30-day money-back guarantee with all of Chris's products. So I love the product. He's a great guy. It's a Main Street business, and it's the only sponsor I have, probably the only sponsor I ever have, except for whatever I do. So there you go. Today's star of the day, brought to you by True Hemp Science, is none other than Carlos the Jackal. You may ask, who the hell is Carlos the Jackal? Carlos the Jackal was one of the terrorists of the 1960s and 70s. So this is back in the days when Muammar Gaddafi was into terrorism, right? Like Muammar Gaddafi was not a big fan of the nation state of Israel. And so Libya became this hangout for terrorists, right? People that would hijack planes and do all kinds of nasty things and place demands upon the Zionist state of Israel, right? And what's interesting is that, again, things are not always what they seem, or people aren't always who they appear to be when it comes to doing things like that, right? You have people that can swing both ways. They can be part of intelligence agencies, and then they drop into being terrorists and back again. And I'm not saying that that's who Carlos the Jackal was, but when you look at his chart, he's got Neptune on his ascendant. First of all, if you remember yesterday, and this is kind of a good jumping off point. If you remember yesterday, we had Patrick Flanagan, and he had Uranus in the 10th house. So we're talking about, a planet by degrees, right? He had Uranus in the 10th house. So Carlos the Jackal has Uranus on the midheaven, right? Which is different coming from the 9th house. And the other thing that Patrick had is he had Uranus trining all those planets in his 2nd house, which, we could make a case, right, for his genius. Like when you add up all those trines, it's like, wow, that's really interesting. And he brought this very Uranian approach to the world, which is what the 10th house is. So by degrees, Uranus is not far away from being over here, but it's very different, right? Because it is in the 9th house, although we do have this conjunction with the midheaven. It is here, right? It is here. This is where it is living. And Uranus in the 9th house is radical belief systems, right? Radical belief, whatever they are, whatever your belief system is. Nobody's going to tell you how to believe or where to invest your quote unquote faith, right? So radical is the key term here for Uranus in the ninth house. And he has a square with Uranus with Mercury, right? So this is a guy who studied abroad. He's born in Venezuela. Like a lot of quote unquote terrorists or figures of terror, they all study in Europe. And Carlos the Jackal is not the exception. Like Pol Pot fucking studied in Europe. Frantz Fanon studied in Europe. Um, Kim Jong Un studied in Europe. They all go to Europe and they all get classical Marxist training in Europe, and he's no different, right? So the ninth house was also higher education, and he eventually lives abroad, but he lives in all these different places, which is the moon in Gemini. And again, with the moon in Gemini, who's this guy really working for, right? Like who? And he's been lionized. Oh, look, he's got Mars and Pluto in Leo in the 11th house. Let the lionization begin. He's had movies made after him. I saw one movie on Netflix years ago that was about Carlos the Jackal. It might have been like a 3-part series or something. And he didn't look anything like that, right? Like the version of Carlos in this movie was like, really kind of machismo and you know, had a lot of, what's the word I'm looking for? Brio. There's a word for you, brio. Had a lot of brio, right? This guy, looks like a fucking nerd. But what's interesting about him is the fact that he's kind of known, or at least he was known as being like a master of disguise. Like he could blend in and change his appearance. And that's where we have Neptune on the ascendant. Now, Neptune on the ascendant means a number of different things, but you could show up differently to different people with Neptune on the ascendant. One person could say, oh, yeah, this is what they look like and this is who they are. And another person could have a very different description of you if you have Neptune on the ascendant. And so that's how Neptune, there's many, 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 many sort of descriptors of Neptune on the ascendant. But one of them is being very fluid with the identity and probably having lots of passports and lots of different names, right? Like he wasn't just, hi. You're jumping off in, I don't know, Stockholm. Hi, I'm Carlos the Jackal. No, the guy probably had about 20 different passports, right? So that's very Neptunian on the ascendant. Like the identity is very fluid. Like, even the name Carlos the Jackal is in some ways very Neptunian. It's not even his real name. But that's what he's known by. Like he became a brand, like a terror brand. But the lionization, even back, I remember as a kid, I bought a copy of High Times magazine, and they had a big story about Carlos the Jackal in fucking High Times magazine, right? So they were turning him into like a cult figure. And again, the term that I used was lionization. And he has Mars Pluto conjunct. So the whole idea back then is that there was a group of international terror cells. Now, again, whoever was behind these people, that's a whole different story. But you had the Red Brigade, the Bader Meinhof gang, you had the PLO. There was like fucking professional sports teams when it came to terror back in the 70s. You had the Japanese, what was it, Omshiro group, right? You had all these terror groups. You had the Weathermen, another terror group. It was all happening. They were like teams. And so it's like a network. And here with Mars Pluto, he's in the network, right? He's in the network. And, with Mars Pluto, it's very intense. And, again, we'll go on face value that he was trained as a Marxist and was employed in a way that was probably monetarily as well as ideologically. He probably loved what he did. Like he got into it, right? He got into it. He became his own myth in a lot of ways. I think the challenge with this chart has a lot to do with the Jupiter square the Jupiter square to his sun, because there's always overreach. There's always like too much bravado. Like I'll never get caught, right? Upping the ante with whatever next round of terror, Carlos the Jackal would be involved with. That's the Jupiter Sun square, and then Saturn in the 12th house, which is a very interesting placement. And he's got that trine with Jupiter. I mean, to me, it feels like the guy probably felt like he was on a mission. That's what it feels like. And there's a weird purity with Saturn and Virgo. There's a weird purity with that. It's sort of like, okay, I'm going to balance the scales of the planet, and I'm going to be the one who's going to do it. And then he's just got that Mars Pluto sextiles his sun, and the guy was into it, man. Mars Pluto sextiling his moon. That's why we know as. I mean, how many other terrorists do you know by their nicknames? Right? There, not many. But you have Carlos the Jackal, a true node in Aries too. Just do it by any means necessary. There you go. Your star of the day. And the other thing too, we'll get back to his sun sign just for a second, with that conjunction with the South Node. Again, Libra wants to balance the scales. Right? In this guy's mind, he was trying to balance the scales, no matter who he worked for. And I'm sure he worked for any number of people who would pay for his services. If they were aligned ideologically for him, better. All right. There you go. Our star of the day, Carlos the Jackal. All right. I'm out of here. Thanks for being here. Have yourself a great day. And here we go. We're headed into the vortex, right? Don't be afraid. Do not be afraid. But do apply situational awareness and do it every day. Friday the 13th doesn't have to be situational awareness day. Employ it every day. If you want, buy me a cup of coffee. There's a link in the show notes. And if you're interested in being a virtual attendee, and you will get a copy, by the way, of the, so if you buy a ticket, you will still get a copy of the event, right? Three talks, and you will also have some interactivity with the people at the event. And it'll all be post Eclipse, right? So that link is there. You can get the ticket through Ticket Spice. And if you're a member and you did not get the newsletter, reach out to me. You can do it. There's a lot of you have my text number, or there's a number up on the website. You can just call me. That rolls to me. All right. Take good care. We're going to do a very brief 15 minutes, and then it's off, me plugging into the Mars-Saturn trine. Use your head in order to discern what's real, your heart to step what's possible. I'm Robert Phoenix. Take care, and bye for now.